clapping actually, clearly haven't even started yet, so that's brilliant. Can you hear me? Is that okay? Yep, so my name is Sanjesh Sharma. I run a company called New Ways to Learn. Just to put things into context as to why I'm here, and it's not because Stephen Heppel was booked, it's because I used to be a teacher. I actually spent 14 years in education, which sounds like a long time to me, but clearly isn't a long time to lots of people here who've been in there far longer. But I used to work at Genogly City Academy, which in kind of mid-2000s was a flagship academy for the Labour government. We did a lot of really quite exciting things. And I kind of left that to go into consultancy and all the usual things people do when they leave education. But ultimately, we basically do 4 core things. So just to give you an idea about what qualifies me to stand here today, we do a lot of training with schools. We do a lot of visioning work with schools, getting schools to think about where they want to be in 5 years' time, or where the trends are going to put them someplace in 10 years' time. We do a lot of thinking outside of the box, and I think that's part of the reason that I kind of wake up every morning, is because I get to be quite quirky with technology and thinking about how parents and students might access technology in a better way. And then finally, we do a lot of stuff around solutions. So rather than box shift, a lot of the stuff that we do, is just good and proper solutions, making sure that what schools get in their hands is actually something that they can make work in their classroom, rather than just shiny bits of tech. So that's what I do, and the focus today is communication. And now, I've really tried to look at what some of the challenges are when it comes to communication with both students and parents, and to try and capture that in this presentation, okay? But I just want to get started by setting the scene, looking at some examples of good communication and also poor communication, and some things that we may well recognise as well. So I've got a short video here, just to get started. Is the volume turned up?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
Are you having burritos for lunch?
I was just poking somebody on Facebook.
The question is whether we're going to go forward to tomorrow or we're going to go past to the back.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
What is the most inspiring thing I ever said to you?
Don't be an idiot.
You hit reply all. I hate to do this, but we have to eliminate some positions, and yours is one of them. Huh? It's hard for me to explain why that was the case. Just take my word for it. Our profits are the highest they have been in the history of our company.
But maybe I need to be even approachabler.
All we need now is to get the stuff translated into every language.
It's a beautiful day. This is Abby.
This is the German Coast Guard.
We're thinking.
What are you thinking about?
Decision has been reached, and it is Tom Henderson.
No way!
So you're highly motivated and energetic.
Hey, Tiny, you get something? Tiny, what'd you get? Tiny! Tiny, oh my God!
911, what is your emergency, please?
Yes, please help us. I think he's dead.
I need you to make sure he's dead.
Well, I can do that. He's dead. Now what?
In conclusion,
I'm just glad there's no tables up here actually for me to fall over. So, but I mean, there's some probably epic examples of what we would classify as bad communication. And I think, when you think about Ron Burgundy and Anchorman, that's pretty much going to sum up your perception of me in the next 45 minutes. So, just to get started then, in terms of communication and focusing on communication in schools, I've broken it down into 2 core areas. There's the technical, and then there's the side that we're actually really quite interested in. But just to cover off some of the technical, and I should point out, you know, I used to be a teacher, I used to be an assistant head in the school. I like my gadgets, but in terms of technical, you'll see that my overview is fairly superficial in terms of technical. In terms of technical, fiber. Fiber means things are getting faster, okay? And whatever happens, your broadband connection will continue to get faster. There's some great stuff happening with NFC. You know, you can pay with your phone, you can pay with your card by just touching a terminal. There's some really interesting stuff, you know, in terms of cellular connections moving from 4G to 5G to 5.5G. And of course, Google and Facebook are doing some quite interesting things. But the first thing I want to just quickly emphasize on is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, love it or hate it, and actually this morning's been quite interesting, plugging in these different codes. I'm currently sat on my hotspot off my phone, both my devices, because I couldn't get onto YouTube this morning, hence that video wouldn't have worked. So Wi-Fi is always going to be a bit of a challenge, but there's this great new technology that I don't know if you've heard of called Li-Fi. Now it sounds like this is a joke, okay, but actually this is completely true. It's been developed for the last 5 years. And it uses LED light bulbs to transmit Wi-Fi signals, okay? Now, they're looking at this technology in the developing world in a big way. So, you know, rather than, you know, have to go through all the processes that most of us have gone through in our schools in terms of installing access points and complicated networks, what this does essentially is it transmits it through light bulbs, okay? And it's a brilliant technology, especially when you consider everything that's happening with the Priority Schools Build program, where schools are being refurbished, and also some of the challenges we face on a daily basis about just good Wi-Fi in schools. So actually, this for me is one of the most kind of cutting edge things that's happening around the technical part in terms of communication. The other really interesting bit, of course, is everything that Google and Facebook are doing. And if you don't already know, Google is sending up these massive, giant balloons onto the edge of space to bring on board the next 1 billion people as part of the developing world coming online. And it's doing that to get people doing more Google searches and therefore more revenue. Facebook is doing something very similar. Facebook is dropping these drones. They've recently bought an aerospace company, okay, and they're dropping these drones, again on the edge of space, with the idea about using satellite to connect up, you know, just billions of people who are currently not on the internet and therefore unable to communicate with human beings on Facebook, of course. So, you know, there's some really quite exciting stuff that's happening on a technical level. But I think the ultimate question is actually, how fast do we need it to be? And why does it never seem fast enough these days? So if I think back to my days in the late 90s, when I was a teenager, in the late 90s, I would have been using Napster, for example. It's completely illegal, of course, back then. But, you know, I would have been using Napster. I would have been sat there on a dial-up connection. And yet it still seemed fast enough. You know, I kind of sat there thinking, oh, this is okay. I'm able to download some songs, watch some films and whatever else. But it doesn't matter what we do. I mean, even today when I was checking this connection for this video that I'm running in the presentation from YouTube, I was thinking, is it actually coming down fast enough? I'm on 4G. How quickly am I accessing this content? And I suppose it comes down to the ultimate question, you know, how many megs do we really need? You know, actually, are we always going to be looking for a faster broadband connection? How many schools have taken the time to consider just how much of their bandwidth they actually use? So we've been in schools before where they've gone, we need to go from a 10 gig to a 100 gig line. And then you've gone in and done a survey and they only ever get to about 7. Yet they all tend to do exactly the same time, and you tend to find it's those peak times that people try and define in terms of their connection. So actually, I think we need to get this bit right in terms of the technical. You know, do we need 100 gig connections in the schools? And if we do, are we using that for what percentage of time? Because often you find it's 5, maybe 10%. So just moving on to the more kind of softer side of communication, and I've created this acronym. It's quite a catchy acronym. It's HDDHI. I put the I in the end so that Apple doesn't see me. This stands for Human to Digital to Human Interaction. There you go. It's quite catchy. I've noticed nobody's writing that down or tweeting it out straight away. Yeah, human to digital to human interaction. And the best way to define this is to look at the day in the life of a typical adult. So I've only got myself really to look at. So yesterday I kept a log of all of the interactions that I was making with a digital interface, where on the end of it was another human also interacting with a digital interface. Sounds like a long-winded way to go, but bear with me for a few moments. So this is what my day looked like yesterday. Typically, I did everything from make phone calls using VoIP, okay, in the office, to doing a Google Hangout with my son. I did a FaceTime with my parents in the evening because it was my dad's birthday. I updated our Flipboard. We use Google as the complete backend for everything we do. So Google Drive and all of that kind of stuff was part of my normal day. If you haven't seen Pushbullet is a fantastic app. It was launched I think it was about a month ago. Okay, if you haven't seen Pushbullet, think of the scenario when you're working on your laptop and you get a notification on your phone, and then you pick up your phone and you get distracted for a few moments and you go back to your laptop. What Pushbullet does is it puts all your notifications onto all your devices. So actually, while I'm working away, I get a text message or I get a WhatsApp or whatever it might be, pops up on my laptop, I can take a glance at it, I can dismiss it, and I can carry on working. So what it does is it unifies notifications, and actually as we go through the presentation, you'll see that notifications are a fundamental way to communicate with people. I also had the pleasure of 1 hour in hell when I spoke to TalkTalk yesterday as well about my broadband connection. That was a truly enjoyable process. So this is me as an adult and me as an educator. Actually, what does it look like through the eyes of a child? Now, I'm quite fortunate that I've got 2 kids. I've got a 10-year-old called Jay, and I've got a 6-year-old, he is my child, 6-year-old called Avi, and they are perfect. One is kind of, year 1, year 2 primary. Where is he? He's year 1 at primary, there you go. And the other one is about to go into secondary. Okay, so, he's the one that I've always thought, he's going to go into a secondary school. I used to work in secondary, all the stuff that was going on, what kind of school is he going to go into, how independent is he going to learn, what kind of technology is he going to use. Now, Jay's actually 10, and on a recent trip to London this weekend, sometimes in a car, we get bored, we play these games, and I say games, actually, you'll see it's not that interesting a game, but basically the game's called Reinvent It. We'll be driving for an hour and I'll say to him, I want you to reinvent the kettle, or I want you to reinvent the toothbrush, and he'll come up with all these different ideas about if he could do it with his brain today, knowing all the things he knows about toothbrushes and kettles, what would he do differently? So anyway, it just happened that this week when we were driving down, it took us 3 hours to get to London from Loughborough, which is quite horrendous, really. As we're driving down, I said to him, okay, I want you to think about the most primitive of communication forms known to mankind, one of the most primitive things. Cavemen probably used it in a slightly different way. So I gave him the doorbell, okay, and I said, I want you to reinvent the doorbell, okay, and he sat there, and he realized it wasn't a game. He realized I was trying to get him to be a little bit, inventive and entrepreneurial. So anyway, after about 5 minutes, he came back to me, and this is what he came back to me. Actually, it's not 5 minutes, it's about half an hour of thinking and, going on Instagram and listening to music and stuff. So this is what he came back to me with. He said, first of all, I'd put a camera on the doorbell, okay? And I said, why? And he goes, so that I can see who's outside. And I said, well, how does that all work? And he goes, and then I'd put the doorbell on the wireless network, okay? So he goes, when someone presses, a bit like my phone, it kind of hangs off the wireless network. And I said, that sounds good. And he goes, and I'll also create a backup. And he goes, the reason I need a backup is because the Wi-Fi is always going down. And I said, brilliant, okay, so you thought about fail-safe. And he said, that way, when you press it, it still goes ding-dong somewhere. And then the next thing he said is that now that's all in place, when somebody rings the bell, an app called Ding Dong pops up on my iPad, and it also pops up on your Samsung, and it pops up on Avi's iPad, and it pops up on all over the place. So someone presses the bell, and then using notifications, an app launches on the device, okay? And you have the option of the camera popping up, or just simply kind of like a notification. And then, because there's a camera on the door, and because you've got an app, you can see the person who's at the door. And you could, if you wanted to, talk to them. You could say, go away, or I'm in the bath. But the bottom line is that you can actually talk to and communicate with them, and ultimately, you open the door. Now, I have to admit, I was quite blown away by the fact that he thought about all of these things. However, none of this is massively strange to him. He understands apps, and he knows that apps must be easy to make because there are thousands of apps that get launched on a daily basis on the app stores. He understands Wi-Fi. He's been using it since he was a child. I think even his baby monitor was Wi-Fi. So, he kind of understands, that Wi-Fi is something that exists around us. Every time we have an issue in the house, they just whinge about the fact that they can't get onto Wi-Fi. You can sit there in the dark with no food, but so long as you can get onto the internet, it's really important. So, this is his blueprint for a kind of doorbell of the future. And there's two things I got from this, two quite fundamental things. First one is about how lazy kids are. I mean, the fact that he can't get himself from upstairs all the way downstairs and open the door is quite shocking. You know, he'd rather conjure up this amazing Wi-Fi enabled bell with a camera system and everything else. And you know, I think actually we can really take that into account. Kids have become a little bit lazier, okay? Technology hasn't necessarily made them lazier, but it's just made it easier for them to do things unlike the way we used to do it, okay? When I was younger, when the doorbell rang, I used to get a clap across the head from my dad and go and say, open the door. You see, there was a physical mechanism involved there as well. So the first one is how lazy kids have become. The second one is that despite what we think about how we engage and carry our technology with us day to day, all the time, kids of his generation do it very differently. You know, we're on our phones, you know, I'm standing here right now and I've got 3 devices. You know, I can't do this whole presentation without having 3 devices with me. And I think I'm, you know, uber tech and everything else. But, you know, kids will probably look at this and laugh and say, why do you need 3 devices? You know, I can do pretty much everything I need to do with what I have in my pocket or an iPad mini or a Google Nexus. So then I thought about how else does he communicate? And actually, you know, he's a very typical, probably slightly more tech savvy, but he's a very typical 10-year-old. And these are the other ways in which he currently interacts in terms of core communication skills. Now, the first one is that he does not SMS, okay? The whole "it ain't great, mate" is actually something that we conjured up. Our generation created this because of how expensive it was to send texts when mobile phones first came out. You know, the reason we used to write like this, you know, people who clearly had come through a full-blown grammar system through education, you know, able to communicate using the right verbs and adjectives and everything else. We did that, not kids. You know, when you look at kids today, you know, you genuinely look at kids today and what they're writing on their posts and stuff, they don't write like that. And it's because kids don't generally use SMS. They use iMessage, which is data-based, or use WhatsApp and things like that. So that's our fault. You know, we're the ones that have created this aspect of what we call a complete destruction of the English language, not his generation of kids. The second one is he does not email. And actually, the only time he's going to really start to email is if his teachers at school force him to email. The only reason he's got an email account is because he needed it to authenticate websites. I mean, so to get onto the Xbox Gold Live stuff and to get onto Instagram, he needed an email address, and I wasn't going to give him mine. So just created him an email address, and now he can access those sites. He never looks at his Gmail, ever. Okay, so again, the only reason he'll ever do that is if schools, or the school he goes to, suddenly forces him into that kind of environment. What he does do in terms of communication is he's got a YouTube channel. Okay, he's got a YouTube channel, and if you go to it, he's probably had about 6 watches on about 4 Minecraft videos that he's uploaded. If you know 10-year-olds, you know they're into Minecraft. You've probably heard of Stampy Longnose, who still lives with his mum, apparently. This is a grown man who spends all of his time talking over gameplay. And he gets more hits than anyone does in the entire world on his websites. And that clearly is an inspiration for him because he's gone off and he's made his own. Xbox, you know, on the Xbox Gold, he basically talks to his friends. They don't communicate because the keyboard in the Xbox is not particularly impressive, so therefore they're constantly communicating by talking. And then Instagram, and actually, you know, you're probably wondering, well, he's 10 years old, you know, should he be in Instagram? He was one of the last people of his mates to go into Instagram. I really ummed and ahed about it, thinking about, you know, e-safety and all the stuff that I used to talk about when I was in schools. But actually, you know, interestingly, it's a fairly closed environment. It's not like Facebook at all. And the only time he can post something is if he attaches a photograph or a video, so it's very contextual. So you tend to find it talking about things they're putting on rather than just going, I hate school. You know, he's actually got to go to school, take a photograph of it, put that on, and then say, I hate school. So it's contextual, okay? But this is the way that he communicates with the wider world at his age. And actually, when we look at the trends, interestingly, he fits exactly into those trends. Like most people his age, you know, give or take 3 or 4 years, he fits right into those trends. The trends are videos and images increase engagement dramatically. Okay? If you're just sending out emails and stuff to your parents and pointing them towards newsletters that might be PDFs, actually using videos and images is going to create more of an engagement. For the first time last year, ever, mobile overtook internet access, fixed internet access for the first time. We now access more content via mobile phones than we do via fixed computing, okay? And actually, when you look at what happens after 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening, that just really kind of changes balance. You know, it's almost like, 75, 25%. Which gives you an idea that if you're trying to engage with families and you're trying to engage with parents at home, it's unlikely they're going to be sat on a desktop computer or a laptop computer. They're going to be on mobile technology. And the last one is that video is going to be big. Video is big. Video currently makes up 79% of all internet traffic. And again, when you look at the numbers, so we'll just look at YouTube, and I think some of these numbers are quite staggering. I mean, 6 billion hours of video watched monthly. TV never clocked up those kind of hours. And of course, this is something that you have to access via a browser while you're online. But the one that really staggers me is always this one. 100 hours of videos are uploaded every single minute. So by the end of the conference today, we'll have, we'll have 800 hours worth or something that have been uploaded to the internet. So his world is very much about these trends, okay? And it's about the way in which, actually, even without knowing the trends, everything that's happening out there is kind of forcing him and forcing most young people down a particular route. So, what does this mean for schools? And when we think about communication as a fundamental function of what schools do on a day-to-day basis, what challenges does it present for the schools? And what new opportunities is it going to create? And I want to talk about this in the context of two stakeholders, parents and students, okay? I'm quite fortunate that I've been on both sides of this. I'm a parent now, and I get lots of communication from my kids' schools. And of course, I've also been in schools where we've had lots and lots of technology, and we've had to really look at the communication perspective. So, starting with parents, and this is probably an American stock family. I think they get dragged out every time someone can't find a picture of a happy family in the UK. These guys get dragged out. Happy people, parents. There are potentially 2 or 3 ways that schools currently engage with parents. First, and I suppose the most obvious one, is things like newsletters, and we'll come to that in a few moments. The first one I want to start off with is email. Okay, these are actually 2 email screenshots of the emails I get from the 2 schools that my kids are at. Okay, and first of all, you can see that unfortunately for Seagrave School, which is the one on the right-hand side, I haven't opened them. Okay, put my hands up and say that I haven't actually opened them. I'll be honest, I don't feel particularly inspired to open them, because when they turn up, that's kind of what they look like. Okay, they're not particularly well formatted. The one from Merton, and by the way, we're working with these schools, and I did get permission from the head just to point this bit out, and we're actually working with them on some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, so I think it's okay. Here we go. This is Merton School. It actually says, do not reply. At teachers to parents. It doesn't even want me to communicate back, which kind of suggests that we do have an issue here. We have a genuine issue here, Also, if you look at the text, it says, please see attached, many thanks. And what is it? Frozen Film Club. I'm not a big fan of Frozen, not anymore. However, I'd want a little bit more inspiration when I first see that bit of information to make me want to click to launch the PDF. Now, if schools look at this kind of stuff in the same way marketing companies look at it, I think you'd do things dramatically differently. If like a marketing company was to buy your business by sending you that kind of email with a PDF attached, with very little behind it in terms of incentivizing you to click it, you won't do it. So I think we can potentially say that it's time to give up on email. Email in business is pretty much going nowhere. You send out 10,000 emails, you're expecting a conversion rate of about 2 to 3% as a business. And on schools, it's kind of the same thing. When I think about these emails that come through, there was a much greater chance that if they printed it, shoved it in a kid's bag, and brought it home, and then he accidentally dropped it on the floor while he was emptying out his PE kit, and I walked through the house and thought, look, there's something on the floor that I should pick up. There's a much bigger chance of me reading that than seeing it clocked in with all my work email and all my personal emails, and also not being able to read it instantly. So there is a challenge there, okay? We haven't fixed anything at all in terms of parental communication through email, so it's definitely worth considering that. What's the other way that schools communicate? SMS. I like this one, George Foreman, No McGrill. SMS is better, kind of. It's kind of better. And of course, SMS has now been in schools for about 10 years, 10, maybe even 12 years. Some of the earlier systems that enabled you to just whack out loads of, unemotional text to parents. And of course, they're good for some things. They're good for make sure you bring your PE kit tomorrow, but they're not good for two-way. So it's not really communication. It's more just informing people. And actually, there's a character limit. And of course, if you've got an SMS system in school, you're paying per character, guaranteed, or you're paying per text. It's flat. It's not formatted. It's not really the way people access information in this day and age. And I think that's a fundamental thing that we need to try and adapt to. So, how can we make it more exciting? How can we make it so it has more impact? And I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm assuming in this room, there's probably 40% of you, maybe 50% are on WhatsApp. And the reason you're on WhatsApp is because it's free. And also it gives you rich communication, as in you can chuck in pictures, videos, voice, and all that kind of stuff. WhatsApp is now available in your browser and for your desktop. So if you go to, I think it's just Google WhatsApp for browser, you can now WhatsApp from your browser. Now, you could ideally take your parents' phone numbers that you've currently got sitting in your SMS system and chuck them into your WhatsApp and then communicate with them completely for free in a rich manner. So you could send out, the head could go, press the little volume thing on WhatsApp and say, how you all doing? I hope you're having a good day. We love your children. Let go. And it would just send that out as a voice message from the head in seconds to all of those parents. Now, you could do that for free. And actually, as a parent receiving that message, I think, oh, that's nice. That's nice of the head. And suddenly you've got this structure that you can start to build around some of this. Now, I know none of you are going to rush out and download WhatsApp and start using WhatsApp in your school, but is SMS working in your school? And is it really encouraging parents to want to talk back and communicate with you? And also, what are you communicating? It's great that you need to bring your PE kit in, but there's so much more that schools can share. And this is a fundamental aspect of what is changing. So for me, parental communication needs a destination. It needs to end up somewhere. And too often it ends up in a PDF that goes nowhere, or it ends up in a text that goes nowhere. And what it does need is a destination. And that obvious destination is your school website. How many times have you communicated with parents and pointed them back to your website so that actually what they're doing is seeing the bigger picture rather than just that newsletter for the week or just that message, okay? Absolutely look to increase engagement with videos and images. And again, you've got, in some of your schools, in large secondaries, you can have 1,000 individuals gagging to take videos and images because that's what they do at their weekends. So how can you put them into action to create content for your website? PDF newsletters, there has to be an end to PDF newsletters. Microsoft Publisher being used to create a template-based newsletter that goes out to parents. And unfortunately, in most cases, it doesn't even reach parents. So why not just have a live blog that's created by students and teachers and the head and everyone else in that school that people can access. Blogging feels way more up to date than a PDF newsletter ever did. Okay. The last one is there's a number of schools at the moment that are looking at creating online communities, almost on par with things like Mumsnet. Where actually what they're doing is they're putting out ideas and getting people to comment. Doing it in a moderated way. So what I wouldn't say is simply get people to comment openly because that could result in lots of negative press as well. What I would say though is that you do it in a moderated way. In the same way TripAdvisor works, in the same way Booking.com work. Those websites, if I put in a bad review on TripAdvisor, the owner gets to see it. But the owner has signed an agreement that says TripAdvisor has the right to publish it, which is the reason why you get bad reviews on those websites. But for the owner, it's a bit of a learning curve. I didn't like your food yesterday, or I didn't enjoy the stay in your hotel. So sometimes you can find that actually works quite well, but it does need to be moderated. So if you're looking at a communication strategy, and a communication strategy that's going to span the next 3 to 4 to 5 years, here are some ideas. The obvious one is to go social. You're not going to reach all your parents by going social, but lots of the schools already out here right now are going social anyway, and whether that's one-way communication via Facebook and Twitter and sites like that, or whether they're actually encouraging proper conversations on those websites, going social is the obvious one, okay? Over time, you'll find that you'll start to reach your students as they get older as well. You know, just think about all those universities that have managed to connect with all the people that left, the alumni, who've left using social media. So going social is the obvious one, and I mean there's lots of different ways that schools can do that, and there's lots and lots of research about how schools can use this in a safe way. Building an app. Now, on building an app, what I would say is, why would you build an app? Why not just use your website? First of all, those websites will let you build free apps. And actually, if you're unsure about it, give it to your Year 10 students that have just been doing a little bit of coding using Scratch. They'll get their heads around it, or give it to your post-16 students. But building an app is not a challenge anymore. Anyone can build an app, because for most of those websites, you're dragging in components. So how do I get to the school? You drag in a Google API. How do I get someone to tweet this message? You drag in a Twitter API. Okay, and you create a really simple app. Don't make it overly complicated, but you create a really simple app. And the key with apps is notifications. That's the key, okay? Doesn't matter how good or bad your app is. When a parent brings a kid to school to join the school, they get a letter that says, you should download our school app. That's it. You know, nothing too fancy. It's not amazing. It's not brilliant. It's just an app. Because the moment they've downloaded it, it automatically, you can obviously create the app to do this, it will automatically let you push out notifications. Which means that, you know, say you, for example, you've had a really good performance of Romeo and Juliet in the school, you know, you can record it, whack it on your website, push out a notification, so that parents can then click on that and watch the video, and then comment on it. So it's little things like that, actually, and notifications is the key. One of the things that's changed in the last 5 years is notifications. iOS 8, Android Lollipop, the latest versions of Google Chrome, all of those now enable notifications to work unlike the way they never used to work 3 or 4 years ago. So notifications is key, and actually, check out some of those websites and you'll start to see just how easy it is to build an app. The second one is, why not include parents in your ecosystem? And by that I mean, for example, any schools who've gone Google or Office 365, it takes seconds to create an email address. So therefore, when a child joins a school in year 7, for example, or when they get to year 2, parents get an email. Okay, but actually that email can be switched on and off by the school. So you can, for example, let parents access the calendar in Google or Office 365, but not the drive and not the email account. So you can turn on functionality. And what it does is it ties people into your school ecosystem, which is more than just email, because actually it ties them into blogging. And it also means that you can send them documents that can be interactive as well. So bringing them into your ecosystem is another important part of how you can get them involved. Lights, camera, action. You kind of need to get making content. If you look at everything that's happening outside of schools, people are obsessing about making content, and it's now easier than ever to push content out to your audience. So for example, if you look at Twitter, Twitter now allows you to drop video into the feed. Facebook does that using its own technology. You've got Vine, 15-second videos that are all about, saying your message really quick. I'm just going to show you a short video here. There we go. There you go. I knew that'd cheer you up. That was my now 6-year-old. That's when he was 4. He's fine now. That video was made by his older brother using an iPod Touch, and he was using a free app called Action Movie FX. Okay, so if you haven't downloaded that app before, it's for iOS, Action Movie FX, and you've got planes flying out of the sky and all kinds of stuff. And the thing is that kids love that stuff. So you've already got this kind of live, active audience who want to make content. How can you make that content relevant to education? How can you make it relevant to what they do on a day-to-day basis in school? So making content, I think, is equally as important as well. And then the last one is about optimizing. And actually, when it comes to optimizing, so many school websites are not optimized to be accessed on mobile devices. If you've ever opened your website up on your iPad or on your phone, you'll kind of get an idea for what I mean. It doesn't look right, or it doesn't fit right, or the navigation isn't the same. And actually, this is probably one of the first things that schools need to look at. The audience you're reaching, whether it's for learning, whether it's for simple communication, is accessing it largely through this kind of technology. So therefore, the primary thing you need to be doing is making sure that they can actually view it and see it and engage with it in this way. Okay? So opening your website up on the whole page, unless you can shrink it down and make it work, doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. But I just want to show you another example, really. How about if we could flip this on its head a little bit? And how about if we could optimize the device to fit around the content? And what I want to do is just show you a quick demo. This is something that we do in education. I'm not sure if any of you have seen this before or not. But here we go. Hopefully this will work. Can you see my eye? There you go. Right then. So, this is an iPad. I'm using a free app called Erasma. Okay. Now, that's all you guys. Here we go. Now, we're a partner with Erasma. Okay, and we look at some of their uses in education stuff. Piece of paper, normal piece of paper, it can be photocopied. It goes into the home at the start of the year and it just goes on the fridge. Or it goes somewhere where it's just going to sit, you know, somewhere where it's fairly communal. And it acts as a bit of a TV channel into the school. Now, the paper portal uses augmented reality to push content weekly to parents via the smart device. Two quite cutting edge, well, not really cutting edge actually, but two concepts that are kind of here to stay for quite a while. This is how it works. There's the iPad, that's on the wall. Child comes home from school and says, oh, have you seen the highlights of the rugby match? I scored the kind of final try. Parent doesn't get a laptop or a desktop, doesn't have to go to the school website, it simply grabs their device, launches the free app, and points it at a piece of paper, and it does this. So now you're watching the rugby highlights on a piece of paper. It's optimized, it's formatted to work on that piece of paper. And now suddenly I can see there you go. I can start to see that my son is now scoring a try. Now it's also multi-channel, which means it's interactive. So if I tap on the music channel, where are we? You'll see that I'm now watching the choir doing their practice on Adele. Okay? Now this technology, it's called augmented reality, and what it does is it overlays content onto physical day-to-day objects that you see around you. So just to show you a couple of other things on this, if I drop it over the information page, this has got 3 zones. I've now got stuff that's happening in the school at that week. Okay, so I've got scrolling text, but watch, if I tap on Bengali, I get it in Bengali, or I get it in a different language at least anyway. If there's anybody who's Bengali here, that's not going to make any sense to you. That's a Google Translate. We're still testing this bit. But what you can see is that what we've got here is the ability to, one, first of all, give people multiple channels. But second of all, if I show you another example, this is one of our live schools actually. So which one's this? Merton Primary School. Let's have a quick look. So you can see down there, that's their information zone, running in the bottom there. And basically what the schools do is that they drop Word documents, videos and pictures into an online storage space that we've created for them. And then that's it. That's all they do. Raw footage, raw images, and drop it into a place. And when you start to look at this technology, it's the same technology that enables you to do stuff like, where are we? Ooh, there you go, stuff like this. That's a picture of the idea of perpetual motion. What the app does enables you to see it like that. Okay, so suddenly I'm looking at the concept of perpetual motion as an animation moving around on a piece of paper that I can zoom into and start to move around. Now this technology is already available for anyone to use. Download the app called Erasma and you'll work out how to make your own content. What we do is we create cloud-based content that schools can access from any location. Okay, and also it's fully optimized to work on 3G, 4G and that kind of stuff. I'll just show you one last example actually, because this is the one where I think schools really get it. I should point out that we're also working on some concepts at the moment. There we go. Erasma, A-U-R-A-S-M-A. So I'll show you one last example, and we're almost on schedule. Here you go. So, page from a textbook. This is all about American history. Yeah, pretty usual stuff. You've all got textbooks like these on your walls. Kids working through it. You've already got tablets in the classroom. Nothing new there. You get to the image of Babe Ruth, and suddenly you're watching Babe Ruth in real life with the sounds, and you really start to get a sense for exactly what baseball is about, rather than just kids thinking it's around us for American people. And it's that kind of stuff when you think about communication. That's about an experience. As a parent, I go to the paper portal, I experience short clippets of video, which if I want to watch the full video, I click on it and it takes me to a website where I can watch the whole lot. And that's a really interesting angle when you think about communication and how schools may well move towards communication. Now, if you haven't already seen examples of augmented reality, they'll be coming to places near you for sure. So you'll start to see them pop up everywhere, really. So that's the paper portal. If you want to, I've got some demos here, so by all means come and grab a demo. All you do is you download the app, follow the channel, and you can make that work before you go for break. It's dead simple to do, takes seconds to set up. So finally, we've spoken about parents, spoken about some strategies for parents. I think for kids, it's actually getting a lot better. And I think a lot of schools here already are doing the kind of things that are improving communication with kids and adapting to where they are. And again, you know, lovely children. I love getting stock photos. I've never seen a group of children that happy before. But you know, we're beginning to see this transition already from VLE to what feels like a social experience, e.g. Edmodo, okay, through to what is probably termed as an ecosystem. And that's schools that are moving towards coupling their VLE with things like Google Classroom, or the Google ecosystem, or Office 365. If you're pure Apple, you'll be using things like iBooks Author from iTunes University. And you know what? This is more in tune with where kids are going. Google Classroom, anyone who's moved toward, actually just really quickly, who's using Google Classroom? Is anyone using Google Classroom? If you haven't seen Google Classroom, okay, it's definitely worth having a look. All right, it's like SharePoint, but just easier. You know, it's just easier for teachers to use and stuff. So it's definitely worth looking at some of those technologies. And what we're beginning to see is this movement from essentially what were email trails and attachments to, you know, posts and comments and the ability to have flipped learning and collaboration. And I think this is a far more exciting place to be in. It's far more in tune with where young people are as well. In terms of flipped learning, and just thinking about how you can get kids to access content from home, if you use Google Chrome, there's an extension called Screencastify. And Screencastify works a little bit like Educreations or Explain Everything, where you can record what you're doing on the screen. However, it's so simple to use inside Google Chrome. You press the button, launches the app, and then you just record whatever you're doing on the screen with your voice and with video. And again, just downloading that, you'll start to see real dividends in terms of how kids can learn. So I could have come here today and spoken about all the things that are shiny and cool, okay? And actually, believe me, I love shiny and cool. I'm proper gadget person. And I've done presentations before where we just talk about the future and all the things that you can do. But actually, I think that'd be the wrong message for schools. You know, schools, in some cases, are 2-3 years ahead. But in other cases, and particularly communication, are potentially a couple of years behind. You know, particularly when we start to use, when we're using those kind of old mechanisms. And you know, this is everything from using OLED screens to interactive surfaces, some great stuff happening with AR and VR and contact lenses, you know, wearable technology. I love all of that stuff. And if you think about notifications, if you had one of these contact lenses, you know, it'd be there the whole time. It'd be amazing. I'd love to live in that kind of world. However, schools are not going to be there. Okay, it scares the crap out of teachers. The idea that, you know, a child might be sitting there, you know, with a contact lens on and everything I say is going off and coming back Terminator style. It's quite a scary place to be. The key here really is that anything, content, anything to do with communication, it should be on demand. Young children expect it. Parents are beginning to expect it. Push it to them, but push it to them in a manner where it pops up and gives them a notification of some kind. And also, crucially for me, is that it's relevant. I think the ultimate utopia, when we think about communication, just to finish off now, is that the information should be relevant. The communication should be relevant. And for me, the utopia is that if we take all the data we collect in schools, and I mean, I was in a school with 2,000 pupils, 300 staff, and we collected a lot of data. Okay, but when I say data, I mean pupil data, but also data on the timetable, data on learning habits, data on what really interests you. You know, you're like an 11-year-old child coming to my school, what are you interested in? And it's about personalizing the content and communication for students. It's about creating this environment where a student goes on and it kind of knows who they are. And I think the best example of this is Amazon. Actually, Amazon kind of does it well. I'm just going to give you a bit of an insight into my life here now. This is my Amazon account. I have vetted this, by the way, just to get rid of all the really dodgy stuff. You can see that I'm a fairly regular bloke, you know, flax seeds. I've got one of those NutriBullets, you know, so you can grind up flax seeds, and I drink tea as well. But interestingly, if you were to look at this, you could start to get an idea about who I am and how to approach me. on almost every level. I don't wear striped tights. My partner, Julie, has also got access to this as well. She uses my account all the time. But you can see, I've got lots of mates who are teachers. My kids are into Adventure Time. I must have kids, that's why there's that kind of Clint Eastwood looking character on there. I obviously work from a home office because there's lots of home office products there. My hair doesn't stay up like this naturally, you know, I must be using some kind of dodgy products. My kids are young, they're into Harry Potter. If you go into my garage right now, you'll see that first one there, which is like a monitor stand, I actually saw that and went, it's too expensive, I can make my own. So in my garage, I've got this half-created MDF monitor stand, because that's the kind of type person I am sometimes. And it's also got an idea about the books that I read. It knows that I like spicy food. It also knows that I like magic. Suddenly, what Amazon is doing, and I have to admit, it winds me up sometimes, because it seems to always give me the stuff that I've already bought. However, that is a hell of a lot closer to where many of us are with regards to our parents and students and kind of understanding where they are. So, I think if we can get to this point, and we can start communicating with them in this way, I think it could be quite an interesting place. That's me done. Thank you.